Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a disturbing nature.
And we're not going to hold back on the graphic details and disturbing content.
So we do not recommend our podcast for children under the age of 13.
And while we respect the victims and their families involved in these tragic cases,
we're also going to be critical of mistakes that are made during the investigations.
And we're going to use dark humor to express ourselves now and then.
So with that said, this podcast may not be for everyone.
And that's okay. We're glad you're here checking us out.
And if you've made it this far, welcome to the Unsung Murder Ballads family. And follow us on Instagram at Unsung Murder Ballads if you want to talk to us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Unsung Murder Ballads. This is episode 106. I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
Alrighty, so tonight we have a case that brings us back partially to New England, which is where we're all from. So
yeah.
No, keep the crime out.
Right, exactly. But you know what? I have to say, as much crime as there is in the world, the New England states are generally pretty good about crime. We don't have quite as much as other parts of the country. So
yeah, I mean, there's a high correlation between cold weather and less crime, and heat can make people go a little crazy. I don't want to go outside to do anything. Never mind bad things.
Exactly. So you know what? I'll take that.
No, there's actual data on it, like the murder spikes during the summertime even.
Well, I understand that heat, especially oppressive heat, like heat waves, brings out the worst in people. So you're probably right. Yeah, you're probably very right.
I know I've heard the narrative of it happening a lot in places like Chicago where there's people fear the summer. I'll send you a song about it.
Cool. All right, you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
In the summer of 1985, Jesse was 11 years old. Jesse and his friends were playing the coolest version of hide and seek I've ever heard in my life.
Oh.
This is awesome. They were literally, everyone would hide, and whoever was the seeker, rode around on a four-wheeler looking for everybody.
Yo,
very fun.
That's awesome.
And if you were the last one found, you got to ride the four-wheeler and be the seeker. How fucking
That's very fun. That's motivational.
I know, that's awesome. I'm jealous. So they were playing in Bear Brook State Park, New Hampshire. And it is basically it's a 15 square mile area of tall red pines and swampy, tangled forest. One day...
Not a great place to be getting lost.
No, but I don't think the whole place is swampy.
Oh, got you.
Now, one day, in the middle of their game, the boys found a barrel out in the woods.
Well, that's never good.
Now, this is a 55-gallon blue steel drum, which was covered with a lid. However...
Nope, don't like that.
However...
Did it smell weird?
We'll get there. However, it wasn't fully closed, and a plastic bag was squeezing through.
Oh, God.
The boys tried to pull the top of the barrel off, but then they were hit with what to them smelled like rotten milk.
Okay.
Not knowing what else to do and being, 11-year-old boys, they kicked the barrel over.
Oh.
Sounds like what an 11-year-old would do.
Exactly.
Ew.
The top came off a little more, and something white started to come out of the top of the barrel.
Ew.
So, of course, being boys, they assumed it was just rotten milk, and they left. They rode away on their four-wheeler without looking inside the barrel.
You know what? That's probably for the best for them.
Definitely for the best for them. So sometime later, a hunter found this metal 55-gallon drum laying on its side and called the police. Officer Ron Montspelair, I'm probably pronouncing that horribly incorrectly, but I apologize. But Ron drove out to meet the hunter at the edge of the woods. When Ron opened the bag, he saw the decomposed face of a person.
Whoa.
Ron began staking out the perimeter of this crime scene, but aside from the barrel, there wasn't much else to see except trees. So he kind of thought to himself, how far out do I stretch this police tape in this situation?
An excellent question.
Right?
As far as you can go.
In the barrel, there were two bodies.
Oh,
no. Two?
One was a woman and the other a young girl.
Oh.
The remains were almost entirely skeletal, They were nude. They were dismembered, apparently, so they would fit inside the barrel. And they were wrapped in plastic and tied together with electrical wire.
Oh.
Their skulls revealed that they were both killed by blows to the head with blunt instruments.
Oh, awful.
Based on the level of decomposition, investigators guessed that the bodies had been in the barrel from anywhere from several months to a few years.
Oh.
Police couldn't...
So interesting that they can't be more specific than that.
Well, I guess because of the level of decomposition and like the idea that the barrel had sat there for years just kind of is a testament to how wooded this place is. And
right,
you know, like,
right. And I guess they're pretty decomposed. So
right.
Oh.
So police couldn't find any reports of a missing mother and daughter, not in New Hampshire and not in any of the neighboring states. In 1986, several months after the barrels were discovered, composite sketches of the victims were made, and these were released, and calls did start coming in, but none of it panned out.
Interesting that no one's missing, but they're still getting calls.
Yeah, because like people were like, "Oh, that kind of looks like this person," and then they'll look into it, and it turns out,
and a composite sketch based on just a skull.
Exactly, like that's what I mean. So, how accurate were these sketches really?
Yeah, I guess they're doing what they can, and I applaud them for that.
So, in 1987, less than 2 years after the barrels were found, the state police decided to release the victims' bodies so they could be buried. Parishioners of St. Jean the Baptist Church in Allenstown pooled their money and paid for a gravesite at the church cemetery. The headstone read, "Here lies the mortal remains known only to God of a woman aged 23 to 33 and a girl aged 8 to 10.
So sad.
Their slain bodies were found November 10th, 1985 in Bear Brook State Park. May their souls find peace in God's loving care."
That's a really sweet gesture of them to do, though. It's really beautiful.
And that's where the case goes cold. Now, in 2000, a detective named John Cody was with the state police's major crimes unit, and he was assigned a couple of cold cases, one of which is this Allenstown case.
And now that we have DNA technology, I mean...
Exactly. Cody was expected to work on this case, or his cold cases, basically in his free time, whenever he wasn't working an active case. Now, Cody decided that he wanted to look at all the evidence in person, like himself. He went to evidence storage, and he saw the blue barrel and the plastic and the electrical wire, stuff that had been sitting there for 15 years.
Dang.
He then decided one day to drive up to Allenstown and see where the barrel had been found, and just look about the scene himself. So he goes up.
I like this method.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, this is the way you should do it. So he drives up to Allenstown, and he walks out into the woods, and he found the area where Jesse and his friends had first found that barrel as kids. And he started venturing further and further from the spot where the barrel was found. His eyes were scanning this forest floor for anything that didn't belong. And that's when he came across a second barrel.
How the fuck was that never found?
This was just 300 feet from the first barrel, a full 15 years later.
Are you kidding me?
Dark blue,
What?
55 gallons.
I'm dumbfounded.
Cody shined his flashlight into the barrel, and inside were the remains of 2 young girls.
Oh my God.
I guess we don't know if that barrel was placed there after the first barrel.
We'll get there.
Oh, okay.
One of the victims was about 3 years old, and the other was about 2 years old.
Oh my God.
No.
The remains were skeletal and wrapped in some sort of plastic. Like
Consistent.
like the other victims, they were killed by blunt force trauma to the head. So, this is the story of a serial killer police would come to know as the Chameleon.
Ooh, I've never heard of this one. And interesting. I grew up in New Hampshire, so.
Why do they have to give them names?
This one's very fitting, though. And I agree with you. I was wondering if you were going to know this case because it was from New Hampshire. And
right. I was alive then and like enough to be conscious.
Right. And I was alive the whole time, because I was 11 when the first bodies were found. But like I knew nothing about this until recently myself. So for 15 years, that second barrel sat just 300 feet away from where the first barrel was found.
That's nutso.
Literally, as detectives were searching for clues about the first two victims, they somehow did not see that barrel. And investigators today are confident that they were both there in 1985.
Oh, they are confident
Seriously?
of that.
Yes.
Oh, God.
I don't know
Now,
how they would know that, but I guess you might get to that later.
well, we won't touch on it, but it has to do with the rusting of the barrel. I mean,
Yeah, that can be indicative. Yeah.
But like the thing is, and I listened to a podcast, and I should give this guy a lot of credit. There's a podcast out there called Bear Brook, and I don't remember his first name, but his last name's Moon, and he's a news reporter from New Hampshire. He did this amazing job with this podcast. Kudos and like chef's kiss, like it was amazing. But he actually went out into the Bear Brook Park with someone, and they walked 300 feet away from each other, an entire football field's length away from each other, while out in the woods in the brush to see exactly what that would look like. And he says that he fully understands why they may not have found that barrel.
If they like weren't inclined to really search the area and whatever like that.
Right. And picture an entire football field's length of forest with trees and thick underbrush, and you know what I mean? Like
Right. No, that's imaginable.
Yeah, like it seems weird to us because we're like 300 feet's not that far, but that's when you're looking at an empty football field.
Right.
So DNA test results showed that the adult female that was found in the first barrel was the mother of the oldest and the youngest of the children found in the barrels.
Oh, no.
No.
They're all related.
No, the DNA test showed that the relationship between the middle child and the other victim, there was no familial relationship.
Oh, gotcha. So they're not all family.
Correct. Investigators speculated that the middle child may have been a stepchild or maybe like an adopted child. As important as Detective Cody's discovery is of the second barrel, it did little to move the case forward, and it goes cold again.
Wow.
In 2009, the case had been handed over to New Hampshire's new cold case unit, which was the first of its kind for the state, with a mandate on focusing exclusively on old murders, disappearance, and suspicious deaths.
It makes sense, like especially as like their real DNA technology is starting to get really good. It like makes sense to open up a lot of these cold cases.
Exactly. So in 2012, they took the Bear Brook mystery to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Experts there pored over the case alongside New Hampshire authorities, brainstorming ideas on how to move forward with this investigation. Because if you don't know who the victims are, you can't figure out who might have killed them. It's
right. Very hard to do anything there.
Right. It took them 3 years, but in the fall of 2015, the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit was ready to share some of the work that had come as the result of their collaboration. They announced the results of radioisotope testing that had been conducted on the bones, the teeth, and the hair of the 4 unidentified victims. Now, long story short, because there's no way I can briefly explain the science of all this in a single episode. But basically, using this technique, they were able to determine which area of the world the victims had grown up in, using their bones, and which areas they had been in during the last few weeks or months of their lives, using their hair. Because in the environment, there are certain things that you take in that will come out in your hair or your fingernails. And that's how you can figure out where you've been most recently, because your hair is obviously continuing to grow. But in your bones, they can figure out what your body took in at like from your early years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Which is how like paleontologists and archaeologists do all this shit with like geology and other things, because it also works with stones and things like that.
Right, like I guess it's a form of, or carbon dating is a form of that.
Exactly. So it was through that testing that we learned that the Bear Brook victims were from North America, but specifically the 3 related victims were from New England, which kind of obvious, I think. But the middle-aged child was actually somewhere closer to the Midwest area. However,
interesting. Middle-aged child is a funny way to say that.
Did I say that? Sorry, the middle child.
The child of the middle of the ages.
Yeah, the child from the Middle Ages. So meanwhile, another mystery, thousands of miles away in California, was just beginning to unravel that would lead all the way back to this New Hampshire case. So we're going to take a side journey here.
Like a all the way to the side journey?
Yeah, all the way to the other coast.
Dang.
So Elaine Ramos had planned a big party for New Year's Eve 1999 in Monterey, California.
Did she turn her computer off?
I guarantee you everybody did. So Eileen's cousin Un Sun Jun was coming and had big news. She had finally met someone.
Yay.
Un Sun had a hard time when it came to dating. So when Un Sun, then in her mid-40s, called to say she had met someone, this was a big deal. But when Un Sun and her new boyfriend arrived on the day of the party, Elaine went outside to greet them, and they were driving up in a dirty white van with no windows.
Girl, you finally
it say
found
free
someone.
candy on
And
the side?
Oh, no.
When Elaine saw Un Sun's boyfriend's face, a chill ran down her back.
Uh-oh.
He stuck out his hand to shake hers, and she saw that the fingernails were long and dirty.
Ew.
She said her new boyfriend, Larry Vanner, looked ragged and dirty and seemed a lot older than Un Sun.
Gross.
He was-
Girl,
He was
it's better to be alone than to settle.
right? So he was bald with patches of messy brown hair sprouting out from the sides. And Elaine was unsettled by this first impression, but she wanted to be supportive. Later in the evening, as the party was going, she wanted to get to know him better. And she asked about his life, to which he leaned in close and said, "Don't ever question me or ask me again about my past."
Oh.
And
Okay, red flag number one.
Okay,
And
get out of my fucking house, bro.
right?
Yeah.
But before she could even react, he leaned back and brightened back up, smiling and making small talk as if it never happened.
Of
Oh
course.
yeah, that's a red, the reddest of red, crimson flag.
Throughout the night, Vanner claimed to own property all over the West Coast, but never bothered to explain why he had never taken Un Sun to see any of them.
I love a compulsive liar. She's got good taste.
He also said he once worked for the CIA and could disappear whenever he needed to.
Okay, well, that's the biggest load of shit.
Yeah, come on.
At the end of the night, Elaine offered Un Sun and Vanner a room to stay in as the couple had been drinking and she didn't want them driving home.
Mm-hmm.
Un Sun
Okay, why doesn't she just offer her a room?
Well, Un Sun answered, "No, we're going to sleep in the van."
Ew, what the fuck? Girl, it's New Year's Eve. It's cold.
Yeah, well, it's California, and it's
Yeah, I
the,
guess
the
there's cold
San
places
the
and
San
warm places there.
Francisco area. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Not
So-
that bad.
Now it should be noted that Un Sun Jun is a chemist by profession. For years,
Oh, boy.
she worked in a biotech company near Richmond, California. But Elaine says she was more of an artist at heart. She loved poetry and she loved to travel and she was interested in Buddhism. By the time Un Sun turned 40, pressure had mounted in terms of her finding someone and settling down, and that's when she met Larry Vanner.
Oh, we don't pressure people to do things like that.
Exactly. Un Sun had needed some work done on her house. An acquaintance had recommended him as a handyman, and from there it somehow became a relationship.
Hmm.
After the New Year's Eve party, Un Sun drifted away from her family. Elaine wasn't the only relative to disapprove of her new boyfriend. A few family members tried to talk to her about it, but it only seemed to make things worse.
Yeah, sometimes it just entrenches people deeper.
By 2001, Vanner had moved in with Un Sun, and later that year they got married. But it wasn't
Ew.
official. There was no certificate. The ceremony was held in their backyard, and it had a Star Trek theme.
The fuck?
Right?
My unofficial Star Trek wedding. Okay, whatever.
Right? Elaine wasn't invited, as Un Sun wasn't talking much to her or any of their family by then. But Un Sun did keep in touch with one good friend, Renee Rose. Renee was also a potter, and the two of them would sometimes go to pottery classes and art shows together. They usually spoke at least a few times a week. In May of 2002, Renee called Un Sun to work out the details for a trip they had planned for that following week. When she answered the phone, Un Sun sounded incredibly anxious. She spoke quickly and ended the conversation abruptly, saying, "I'll talk to you tomorrow." But Un Sun didn't call the next day, and she didn't show up for the trip they were supposed to take. Worried,
Oh, no.
Yeah. Worried, Renee left messages for Unsoon on her answering machine. And after a few days, she finally got a call back. It was Vanner. He said Unsoon's mother was dying and that she had flown to Virginia to see her. Renee asked if there was a way to reach her in Virginia, and Vanner said no.
Yeah, likely story.
Renee kept calling in the days and weeks that followed. Each time, Vanner's explanation for why she couldn't talk to Unsoon was different.
Oh, red flag.
Still, Renee kept calling because something didn't feel right. Finally, after several weeks, Renee gave Vanner an ultimatum. She said that she was leaving on a vacation for 10 days and she wanted to hear Unsoon's voice on her answering machine when she got back, and if she did not, she was calling the police. And
Good for her.
Yeah, I would have called before leaving, but I guess that could have potentially fucked up your vacation.
Right, because then you're in the, you don't want to end up in an investigation.
Yeah, and realistically, at this point, it's probably too late. You know what I mean? Or it could be nothing. Yeah. But in the end, that's exactly what she did. In 2002, Detective Roxanne Grunheid was solving cold cases, making a name for herself, when a call came in about a missing woman, Unsoon Jun. Within a few days, detectives brought Larry Vanner in for questioning. Vanner claimed that Unsoon was in Oregon, that she was overseeing the construction of a cabin of one of his properties, but he wouldn't give police a way to contact her.
Whack.
Yeah, nothing suspicious there, right?
No, not at all.
But then his story changed. He said the real reason Unsoon was in Oregon was to see a therapist because she had suffered a mental breakdown. And he said that police calling her would trigger an anxiety attack.
Okay, so call the therapist.
Well, police obviously learned this is a lie, right?
It's pretty obvious.
Yeah. So detectives asked Vanner if they could fingerprint him, and he agreed. Now, Detective Roxanne, she thinks that this guy, Vanner, didn't know that his prints would come back so quickly because the last time he was in custody was over 10 years before. And that was before the process was handled by computers. She thinks he agreed to be fingerprinted because he assumed it would take at least a few days to get the results back, giving him plenty of time to get the fuck out of Dodge, get a new name, and start all over. But that plan didn't work.
Not so much.
When detectives came back in the room with Vanner, one of them was holding a manila envelope with the results of his fingerprints, which included a criminal record and a list of known aliases.
Dang!
Wow.
God, we love computers.
Larry Vanner's fingerprints belonged to a man whose name was Curtis Kimball. And Curtis Kimball was on parole.
Oh.
In 1989, Kimball had been convicted of child abandonment and spent a year and a half in a California state prison.
Dang.
On the day that he was released, he skipped town, violating his parole. Now, in California, parolees and their property are subject to police searches for any reason at any time. No warrant required.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're on parole, so you've kind of,
right.
You know what I mean? Instead of being in a prison cell, you've opted to give up your privacy, which makes sense. Now that Roxanne had Curtis Kimball's record in her hands and he had violated his parole, she saw a new opportunity. She could legally search his home.
Yeah.
So Roxanne and another detective named Mike Costa drove out to Unsoon Jun's house where she lived with Kimball, where they had been living together, and they searched it room by room. They were looking for a missing person, so they're not flipping drawers or anything. And nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But that changed when the search moved outside the house to the garage.
Oh, it's always the garage.
The sliding garage door had a padlock on it, but Roxanne found the key on Kimball's keychain. She threw open the door and was presented with Unsoon's pottery studio. But in the back, they found a doorway that led a few steps down into an unfinished part of the house, sort of like a basement crawl space with a dirt floor. It's probably like 3 to 4 feet high, not quite tall enough to stand in, kind of thing.
Oh, God.
Creepy.
They stepped into the area and looked around with their flashlight and found a huge pile of kitty litter.
Oh.
Weird.
This pile was almost waist high and
I assume they didn't see cats in the house.
no, and it's 5 feet long, like enough to fill the bed of a truck.
What the fuck?
And to be more specific, it was 250 pounds of cat litter.
Holy hell.
So much fucking cat litter. What the fuck?
So Roxanne called for a forensic team. Within a few swipes of the pile, the first thing that emerged was a mummified human foot that was still wearing a flip-flop.
Oh, God.
The forensic team found blood splatter on a heating and air conditioning ductwork near the pile of cat litter. It suggested that Eunsoon had been bludgeoned to death there in the crawl space.
Oh my God.
Yeah. As they cleared away the cat litter, they found her dismembered body.
What a horrible grave.
That's terrible. A fucking pile of cat litter. Like, I'm blown away by it. Like, I understand it's absorbent, like, because it's mummified. Like, was that his plan all along?
Or maybe the odor absorbent too.
No, I didn't even think of that. Shit. There might actually be a degree of genius in that.
Yeah.
Fuck. Okay.
A non-murder fumble.
Right?
Or murder non-fumble.
Yes. All right. So, police needed to know who was Larry Vanner or Curtis Kimball. His criminal record began in 1986, about 15 years before he had met Eunsoon, with a warrant issued for child abandonment. According to the police reports, he had left his 5-year-old daughter at an RV park with an elderly couple and then fled.
What the fuck?
At the time, he was using the name Gordon Jensen. A few years later, he was pulled over driving a stolen car, but he gave the officers the name Gerald Mockerman, but his fingerprints linked him back to the child abandonment charge. He was convicted of the charge and served about 1.5 years of his 3-year sentence before being released. And there's not a whole ton of information, but yeah, that's what they found out. So it's at this point that they had moved forward with the trial of Eunsoon's death. However, on the first day of the trial, Vanner/Kimball stood up and told the judge he wanted to change his plea to guilty.
Shit.
First day. Holy crap.
Yep, he was willing to accept the 15 years to life sentence.
Probably because he thinks he's smart enough to get away with it.
Well, Detective Roxanne Grunheid, she thinks that he did it because he wanted her to stop investigating his life and previous crimes.
Oh.
Because with a guilty plea, there's no reason to dig further.
Right.
But Roxanne did not stop.
Good. She's a good investigator.
Back at her desk, the crime she found the most puzzling was him abandoning his 5-year-old daughter at an RV park. Roxanne became fixated on this little girl. Her name was listed as Lisa, but she actually was not so sure that was going to be the case. When Curtis Kimball and Lisa were staying at this RV park, he was using the name Gordon Jensen. But she knew that that was an alias. It wasn't his real name. So she's pretty sure that Lisa isn't her real name either.
Probably not.
And if that wasn't her real name, maybe she wasn't really his daughter.
Oh,
No, but like, wouldn't they have the real name in the police report? That's kind of weird.
Well, this little girl who was abandoned with this couple, which we're about to get into, she only knows her name is Lisa.
Oh, but it's not like it might not be her legal name.
Right. So
That's what we're saying.
Once he runs out, how do you find out the truth? Roxanne wanted to do a paternity test to know for sure. She had Kimball's DNA from their homicide investigation, and she learned that detectives investigating Lisa's abandonment had taken a blood sample from her back in the 80s. So she convinced the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department to split the blood sample, which they had FedExed to her, and she ordered a paternity test as soon as it arrived. And, as it turns out, Lisa was not biologically related to the man claiming to be her father. It had taken almost 20 years since Lisa was abandoned for someone to figure out that she was a living Jane Doe.
Holy hell. That's mind-blowing.
The fact that she had a real family and a real name somewhere out there, just fucking 20 years. She had no idea.
It's crazy that they didn't figure that out during this case.
It's exactly.
Where he got like convicted and sent to prison for this.
Exactly. And she's out there as a missing person, but nobody knows. And she's grown up under this, probably under the name Lisa Jensen for 20 years.
Wait, so she's a missing person?
Well, they don't know who she is. She's not his daughter, and he abandoned her somewhere. By ordering this paternity test, Roxanne revealed a mystery that was not unlike the ones up in Bear Brook Park. Because although Lisa was alive, she was just as unidentified as the victims found in those barrels. But now we will finally go to 1986, and where we find a man calling himself Jordan Jensen living at an RV park with his daughter, Lisa. She was 5 years old at the time. Now, also at this RV park was a couple named Richard and Catherine Decker. They were from San Bernardino, California, and were only staying at this park for a few months. The Deckers became friendly with Gordon Jensen and Lisa. They had a grandson that was roughly her age, and they became playmates. Before long, the Deckers started babysitting Lisa while Gordon Jensen was busy. They grew fond of Lisa. They started to actually care for her. And it was that relationship that probably saved her life. The Deckers began to become a little concerned because they noticed that she looked really thin and she had zero toys to play with. Gordon Jensen told the Deckers that Lisa's mother had died of cancer when she was a baby. And Gordon Jensen admitted to the Deckers that he was having trouble raising her on his own. So one day, the Deckers shared with Gordon that they had an adult daughter back in San Bernardino who was having a hard time having kids and was considering adopting. Gordon Jensen liked this idea. A few days later, he offered Lisa up for what basically was like a trial adoption. The idea is that the Deckers would take Lisa to their daughter in San Bernardino for 3 weeks. If things went well, they would come back to the RV park with an attorney and make the adoption legal. Once away from Gordon Jensen and the RV park, Lisa started showing huge signs of abuse.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
She started touching the Deckers' son-in-law inappropriately.
Oh, no, we know what that means.
Because she had no idea it was wrong. And she was beginning...
My heart aches.
And she was beginning to talk about things that Gordon Jensen had done to her.
Oh, poor baby girl.
Police described what happened by saying that Lisa was severely molested and tortured.
Oh.
Now, getting Gordon Jensen to sign this legal adoption would now seemed paramount to the Deckers. But when,
oh, yeah, most definitely.
But when they returned to the RV park, he was gone.
Gone.
He just fucking vanished.
Of course.
The Deckers didn't know what else to do, so they called the police. In 1986, the police took Lisa into protective custody, and she went into foster care and was eventually adopted. This is why they don't know anything else about her. There's no mother to turn to. There's no, you know what I mean? It's just this one guy using a fake name.
Gotcha. And there's no records of this adoption?
No, there's a record of her adoption after she was rescued from the RV park.
Mm.
Now today,
oh, I see what you mean now. We don't know what happened to her before that. Okay.
Correct. Now today, she's married with 3 children of her own. She has asked for privacy from all reporters and has released a statement basically saying she's happy and lives a secure life.
I'm happy
Good
to hear
for her.
that.
Yeah.
Poor
But of course, that's
kid.
not the end of the story. It wasn't until 2003, some 14 years after she was abandoned, that they began to investigate her identity. And if not for Detective Roxanne Grunheid, it may never have even begun. In 2010, the man known as Curtis, and this is like a little side note that unfortunately is what it is. In 2010, the man known as Curtis Kimball, Larry Vanner, and Gordon Jensen died at the High Desert State Prison in Northern California. According to his death certificate, the cause of death was a mix of pulmonary emphysema, pneumonia, and lung cancer. His body was cremated, and his ashes
At least it was uncomfortable.
Good, yeah, exactly. His body was cremated, and his ashes were thrown into the ocean off the coast of Santa Cruz, While he was there, he had no visitors. He didn't make a single phone call. He never tried to make a deal with prosecutors with information. He never bragged about anything to other inmates. Whatever he knew about who Lisa really was or what happened to her mother, he kept it to himself. Exactly. Fucking douchebag.
Oh my God.
But jumping back now. In 2003, when the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department opened a new investigation aimed at finding Lisa's true identity, she was 22 years old. But that investigation quickly went nowhere for all the same reasons the Bear Brook murders investigation did. No identity of the victim, nowhere to begin. So for 10 years, there was little movement on this case. Then in 2013, when Lisa was 32 years old, a detective, Peter Headley, took over the case. Lisa's identity wasn't the only mystery detectives were trying to look into. When the case was reopened, detectives were also asking, where was her mother? Had Curtis Kimball killed her? And there was also a story that then 5-year-old Lisa had told detectives back in the 80s when they first recovered her. She had talked about having other siblings.
Oh.
She said that her other siblings had died while they were camping because they ate grass mushrooms.
What the hell?
So there are other victims out here.
Right.
So in 2014, it was Lisa that offered a new suggestion to Detective Headley. Why not try one of those genealogy websites like 23andMe or Ancestry.com? At first, Detective Headley dismissed the idea because genealogy websites had never yet been used in a criminal investigation the way she was suggesting.
Wow.
This is the first case to ever use this.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, fucking crazy. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to do something that would change the face of forensic investigations.
Yeah, for real.
So in the summer of 2016, forensic expert Barbara Ray Venter and her army of volunteers narrowed down the genealogical possibility of who Lisa's mother was to a single person.
Holy crap.
30 years after she was abandoned, Lisa learned her real name.
Oh, how devastating that must be. Like, it's good to find out, but oh, the reality of it.
Yeah, can you fucking imagine? Like,
No.
Gone, you know? Her real name was Dawn Bowden, and she was from New Hampshire. Her mother's name was Denise Bowden. So New Hampshire detectives then interviewed some of Denise Bowden's relatives, the ones that Barbara Ray Venter had found using genetic genealogy. One of them was Denise's grandfather, and he said the last time he had seen Denise was Thanksgiving in 1981 in Manchester, New Hampshire. She was 23 at the time and had a 6-month-old daughter, which was Dawn/Lisa. She also had an older boyfriend named Bob Evans. When detectives showed the grandfather a mugshot of Curtis Kimball, he recognized him as Bob Evans.
Oh.
No one in Denise Bowden's family ever saw her again after that Thanksgiving. But despite all that, they never reported her missing.
Oh, what the hell's going on there?
Weird, right?
Very weird.
So after Lisa was connected to New Hampshire in 2016, a missing persons case for Denise Bowden was finally opened more than 30 years after she disappeared.
God.
That's... what?
Yeah. In January of 2017, police went to the house that Denise Bowden had shared with Bob Evans in Manchester, and with the murder of Eunsoon Jun in their mind, they did a thorough search of the basement. They didn't find anything, which was a huge disappointment because if their body wasn't there, it was unlikely they would ever find it.
Right.
We may never know exactly what happened to Denise. Now, Denise Bowden's strained relationship with her family was too similar to Eunsoon Jun and her family.
Yeah, this guy's a real good manipulator and drawing people away from their families.
Exactly. It is a tactic employed by many abusers to isolate and estrange their victim from the people who might be able to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently Bob Evans and all these other names he used excelled at this.
I bet.
So San Bernardino detective Peter Headley called Bob Evans an incredibly good con man, but New Hampshire prosecutor Jeff Strelzin has another name for him, the Chameleon.
Doesn't he assume so many identities?
Exactly. At first, investigators thought Denise Bowden might be the adult victim of the first barrel. But that test came back negative, and they ran another test using the DNA of Bob Evans. In January of 2017, the New Hampshire Attorney General's office announced that they would be holding a press conference to discuss new information in the Bear Brook case. Over an hour and a half, investigators laid out 4 stories: the Bear Brook murders in Allenstown, the murder of Unsun Jun, the abandonment of 5-year-old Lisa, and the last story, the one that would tie them all together, was the disappearance of Denise Bowden. Denise was Lisa's mother, and she was last seen in 1981 with Curtis Kimball, though she knew him as Bob Evans. This man, Bob Evans, was only connected to Denise's disappearance and the California murder of Unsun Jun, but he's also connected to the 4 Allentown murder victims, because through his DNA, it was determined that he was the father of the middle child in the barrels.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Now, he's not the father or related to any of the other victims.
Interesting.
So, this is when everything finally came together, when they eventually concluded that Bob Evans, Vanner, Jensen, this guy, is behind the Bear Brook murders.
Wow.
By this time, his DNA tests came back, and Bob Evans had actually been dead for 7 years at this point. So they were never able to question him about Bear Brook.
That sucks.
But the evidence connecting him to the Bear Brook murders goes beyond his relationship to just one of the victims. Bob Evans had lived in New Hampshire in the 1970s. He got a job as an electrician helping shut down an old mill in downtown Manchester, removing electrical equipment and cleaning out old debris. And if you remember, the victims in the barrels were in plastic tied together with electrical wire.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. He was also hired out to do electrical work at a place called the Bear Brook store, which wasn't that far from where the barrels were found. So he knew the area.
Damn.
And there was the fact that the cause of death in all the Bear Brook murder victims were the same as Unsun's, which is blunt force trauma to the head.
There's a lot of connections there.
And perhaps the most chilling detail linking Evans to the crime scene is the plastic bags the victims were wrapped up in and tied with electrical wire, which I already said. So the DNA test done on Bob Evans leads us somewhere else as well. And that brings us to a woman named Diane, whose last name I'm not using to protect her privacy and that of her family's. Diane had very few memories of her father. And I want to go, I'm going to spoiler alert here. This DNA testing from the middle child that were in the barrels is Diane's half-sister.
Aww.
And they were able to find this woman, Diane. And basically, from here, they find out who Bob Evans, all that. They find out what his real name actually was.
Wow.
So she had few memories of her father. Her mother had left her father, Terry Rasmussen, when Diane was only 6 years old. There were times growing up when Diane wondered about who her father was, but her mother would not ever talk about him. Then, when she was in her 40s, married with children, Diane finally got answers about her father from a New Hampshire state trooper who showed up to talk to her about the Bear Brook killer's true identity and her relationship to one of the bodies in the barrels. How fucked up.
That's
so fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
So you can see why she doesn't want to be part of this and out in the public discourse.
Oh, of course.
No, I don't blame her at all.
No, not at all. So as we said, his real name was Terry Rasmussen. He was born in 1943. He grew up in Colorado and Arizona. He dropped out of high school his sophomore year, and he joined the Navy in 1961. That's where he served as an electrician and learned that trade. he would leave the Navy and he would go to Hawaii, where he worked at a shoe shop, which is weird, but I guess it was owned by his parents, so I guess not that weird.
Why do his parents own a shoe shop in Hawaii?
I know, right? That's kind of cool. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, random, too.
He married Diane's mother in 1968. The next year, they moved to Arizona with Diane and her twin sister, or well, that's where they were born. And they were the first of what would be 4 children. Now, again, Diane doesn't remember a lot from this period, but she remembered that their house was full of conflict. There was a lot of fighting and abuse. And that's what prompted her mother to leave Rasmussen in 1975.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime...
Good for her. Get out of there.
Exactly. Now, sometime in late 75 or 76, Rasmussen arrived unexpectedly at their new home in Payson, Arizona. This was just a few months after they had left, but it's in a moment that investigators are very focused on. Because when Terry Rasmussen shows up there, he's with a woman. And investigators are desperate to find out who this woman is, and it could be the mother of Diane's half-sister.
Right.
So they're looking for information. So if anyone listening has any information about this, which I know is very unlikely at this point, please reach out to the New Hampshire State Police. He then also worked for a company called Brown and Root, possibly even on an oil rig, until 1978, where he pops up in New Hampshire under the name of Bob Evans.
This is where the false identities start.
Exactly. Now, there are a few things we need to discuss about Rasmussen's timeline here while he's going forward. So in 1980, when he was living in Manchester, New Hampshire, using the name Bob Evans, a certified letter addressed to him was signed for by someone named Elizabeth Evans. Now, Rasmussen also lists his spouse's name as Elizabeth on 2 separate occasions when he's arrested on minor charges in Manchester. Investigators still aren't sure if Elizabeth is a real person or not.
Oh.
But some have wondered if maybe Elizabeth is the name of the adult victim in the barrel.
Maybe.
Also during this time, a woman named, and I'm going to say this to the best of my ability, because I could not find any sources I found on these next 2 people. I could not find it written out in like type. So I don't know the exact names. I only heard it in audio form. So I'm trying to say these, and I tried to type them to the best of my ability to how they were spoken. But also during this time, a woman named Denise Deneau and a 14-year-old girl named Lauren Ron also went missing. Now, nothing officially links him to their disappearances, but considering that they both lived close to him in Manchester, certainly makes for a compelling argument.
Certainly suspicious at the very least.
Exactly. Another moment that raises serious concern is from a few years in the mid-'80s, a period when he left New Hampshire with Lisa, but before he arrived at that RV park. During this time, he had stayed at another RV park in Orange County, California, and he was seen with a woman. She was literally seen in the car with him, and there are other children in the car as well.
Ooh, that's...
So
wow.
we don't know what happened to them. And then there's also a case known as the Lady in the Refrigerator.
Ooh, I hate
What
that
the hell?
name. Wow, Jesus Christ, it sounds like a Goosebumps novel.
In 1995, while out looking for metal cans, someone along the side of the road in Holt, California, found a refrigerator dumped in an irrigation ditch. The refrigerator was tied shut with a rope, but inside was the body of a woman wrapped in a sleeping bag with her hands bound with electrical tape. She was gagged with a sock that was held down by electrical tape.
Oh my God.
And she died from a blow to the head. That may not be connected to him, but it's entirely possible.
Great, there's a lot of things that are possible.
Terry Rasmussen has lived in as many as 13 different states over the years. He's used at least 5 different aliases. The only
That's it? Only 5?
well, that we know
Come
of.
on.
That we know of. The only way to connect some of these dots is if someone recognizes pictures of him, which of course we'll share on our Instagram page. And it also would help if anyone remembers or knows a story about a woman who vanished in those areas after she met a new boyfriend.
Right, because that's his pattern.
Exactly. But now we're going to wrap up this insane case with a nice bow.
Oh, I'm so glad. I was worried this was going to end up as a Jameson case.
Hey now.
Well, we know who the killer is, right? We already knew that.
Right, that's true, but there's still so much that's unknown.
There's three very important things that are unknown, and we're about to put a nice bow on that.
Oh, love it.
A woman by the name of Becky Heath was in her early 30s and living in Connecticut. Becky was what you might call a web sleuth, an amateur investigator who looks into real-life murder mysteries in her free time. One of the cases Becky followed was the Bear Brook murders. When the police announced in 2017 that they knew who the killer was in the Bear Brook murders but not who the victims were, Becky was obsessed. A lot of her research, the actual work of web sleuthing, happens on online forums, message boards where people are looking for people they've lost touch with.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most popular of these message boards is on Ancestry.com. It's a forum.
Interesting.
It's a forum called Lost Family and Friends. It has over 30,000 posts on it.
I believe it.
Becky combed through thousands of posts, spent nearly every waking hour outside of her job on it.
Wow.
In the fall of 2017, Becky came across a post that she could not pass up. After connecting with many people and following many leads that fizzled out, Becky did the impossible. After 33 years of searching, thanks in part to Becky, we now know the identities of the 3 related Bear Brook victims.
Wow.
Yeah, how fucking crazy is that?
That is nuts. That's absolutely nuts.
The adult victim was named Marlise Honeychurch. The oldest child's name is Marie Vaughn, and the youngest child's name is Sarah McWaters. The two girls were the daughters of Marlise from different fathers.
Oh.
We do not know the name of Terry Rasmussen's daughter, and it's likely the only people that did are also dead. So we're probably never going to know what her actual name was.
That's so sad.
And that is the case of the Chameleon.
There were so many twists and turns and oh my god moments in that.
Yeah, wow.
Fucking
what a
crazy.
fucking monster.
And how did we not, growing up here, how did we not know about this case?
Seriously.
Yeah, well, it sounds like we didn't know much about it until recently.
That's true too, but I was paying attention to shit back in 2017. I'm blown away I didn't know about this.
Yeah, that is wild. Yeah, because you were paying attention at that time, yeah.
Yeah, crazy. But yeah, like I couldn't not do this, especially once I found out it was the first case that used genetic genealogy.
Yeah.
And
That was impressive, and the web sleuthing was very impressive
Oh
too.
my god. And I condensed that whole section with Becky could have been another 20 minutes of talking.
Wow.
Really? Holy crap.
What she did was really impressive. I didn't want to spend that much time on it. It was like when we were talking about the isotopes. Like I could have spent 20 minutes explaining that process, and
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
it's crazy. But like this case is impressive as fuck, and kudos to all the investigators involved. You know, it's sad that there's one victim we'll never get a name for, but I don't think anyone knows her name that's left alive.
Yeah, and she was so young too that there's probably no census records or anything.
Right. She was probably born, probably not even in a hospital. You know, he probably killed her mother. It's tough to say, you know, and Lisa/Dawn remembers having siblings that died out in the forest somewhere, and they're not genetically related to her. So like, you know what I mean? Like, so how many other victims does this guy have?
Right, and just barrels somewhere.
Fucking crazy.
Basements and
And refrigerators, maybe. Yeah, like
yeah, maybe.
fucking crazy. The
Yeah.
cat litter thing, like everything about this blows my mind. So yeah.
Yeah, truly a mind-blowing case.
Yeah, it's impressive the way it plays out. It's like a movie, or actually not even a movie, an entire like season of a TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could definitely make a show out of this.
Yeah. Holy crap. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening. Once again, I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.